Welcome to episode 3 of the Beautiful People podcast. I am your host, Taryn Johnson. In this episode, I have the privilege of meeting with Jamie Sue Atkinson, a woman I've personally never met before, but one who felt called to share her story of empowerment with an audience. From homelessness to becoming a successful entrepreneur, Jamie shares the dark moments of her life and realization that these experiences gave her the beautiful perspective and outlook she has on life today. So without further ado, let's hear Jamie's beautiful story.
What a beautiful day on the mountain.
Beautiful.
Beautiful people. Beautiful people.
Beautiful.
Welcome to the Beautiful People podcast. I'm your host, Taryn Johnson. I invite you to join me in this space where energy fuels your empowerment and transformation becomes a way of life. Listen in as I share stories of beautiful people learning to align with their true selves as they break free from limiting beliefs and become the beautiful creator of their reality. I know you are ready to step into your own empowerment, raise your frequency, and learn how to manifest a life that reflects your soul purpose. So let's kickstart that desire and learn how human design can amplify transformations in your life and increase the speed at which you reach your biggest life goals. This podcast will forever be dedicated to my sister-in-law, Kathy Johnson, who taught me just how beautiful life is and that everyone's story deserves to be shared. Now let's get started. Hi, Jamie. Welcome to the Beautiful People podcast. I'm so excited to have you on the show and to hear your story.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Taryn. So excited to be here with you.
So you're actually my first guest that I've not met in person before. I just met in a Facebook group from a business course that we're doing together. So Jamie, what do you want to come on and share?
What I wanted to share today was my experience moving across the country at 18. So I was born and raised in Wisconsin, and then at 18 decided pretty much on a whim that I wanted to move to LA. I had come out here a couple months before I moved out here and just fell in love with it. And when I got back home to Wisconsin, told my boyfriend at the time, oh, hey, I want to move to LA. And he was like, what? I'm like, if you want to come, I would love, I would love to have you. And if you don't, we'd only been dating a few months, So he's like, yeah, no, I'm good. I'm like, okay, cool. He's like, but I'll move you out there and get you settled and everything. So we drove the U-Haul across the country. He gets me settled in downtown LA 20 years ago, which wasn't the best place to be as a 18-year-old naive girl who didn't know anyone in LA.
Coming from Wisconsin, where
Coming from well,
it's like small area and
in Madison specifically, downtown is a place to be.
mm-hmm.
So it's that's where everything happens, So
Mm-hmm.
just with that mindset, I was like, oh, well, downtown's where it's at, and downtown's not where it's at. And maybe now they have the LA Live, and it's a lot different. But so I move out here. My boyfriend leaves, and then I'm out here alone. And this is the summer I graduated high school, and all my friends are partying, going out and talking to them on the phone. And, I'm thinking, oh my God, what did I do? I'm so lonely. It's incredibly lonely. And honestly, if I hadn't signed a 1-year lease, I probably would have moved home within 6 months. But I signed the 1-year lease. And so I'm gonna ride this out. In my mind, there was just no other option. I'm like, well, 1 year, we'll see what happens. After that 6-month mark, everything shifted. I made friends, and it was great. My boyfriend ended up moving out here after 6 months.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, so he moved out 6 months later. And then fast forward 6 years later, we ended up getting pregnant and having a baby. And then the traditional Midwest mindset, was like, oh, well, now you guys need to get married and move back home, because it's better. And so we were basically on board with that. Yeah, we don't really see ourselves raising a kid in downtown LA. We were still living in downtown LA. And so he proposed, and we were planning a wedding, and then we were going to move home. Shortly after that, we were not on good terms, we were growing apart, I had been dating him since I was 16.
Yeah.
I was now 23, 24. And so we were just kind of growing apart, unfortunately, and on different paths. But, talking to my parents and my friends and everyone that I'm looking up to for support, they're just kind of well, relationships are tough. You figure it out. You don't run away, you do what it takes, and everything in me was saying no, it was a hard, like, I'm not happy, you know? And like my mom didn't understand that. I was like, Mom, like,
Yeah.
I'm not happy. And she was like, you will be again one day. And I'm
Yeah.
like,
The same Midwest mentality, like just suck it up and
"Yes."
force it and make it work and go through it. And I know before this, we hopped on the podcast, I read your human design and you have a very strong, like the gut intuition. Your sacral's like very powerful. So I'm sure your gut was like screaming at you, like, this is not right. Like, we need to make a change. I'm sure it felt very like frustrating for you in that moment.
It was so frustrating. And especially with like, my mom, who's my best friend, being like not hearing me,
Hmm.
like she wasn't hearing me, she wasn't acknowledging me. It was just like, it's just part of life, you know.
Hmm.
And so I went through, like, I had called off our wedding, I think 3 months before it. And
Okay.
mind you, we were doing a destination wedding in Mexico.
Yeah.
All of our family was coming out from Wisconsin.
Oh
I
gosh.
called it off because I was like, we shouldn't get married. Like, I could just feel
Hmm.
it, you know? My fiance at the time ended up doing all the things to swoon me back, like the
Hmm.
usual. And we got married in Mexico, although it was never legal. Like, we never even legalized it because I
Mm.
just knew. But we essentially did it because we had a son together and all
Hmm.
the family was coming out. Long story short, a year later, my son and I were moving out. Now I'm a single mom um, with this baby in LA. I have friends, but still like not any family support out here.
Hmm.
And everything, I mean, I guess everything was smooth, right? Like my son's father was taking him on the weekends, so I would
Hmm.
get a little break, and he was helping out financially, which was, you know, fantastic. And then I was crumbling inside, right?
Yeah.
Because I was now, almost 30, a single mom. It's kind of like, what am I doing? What am I
Hmm.
doing with my life? I was drinking every night, a bottle of wine and just numbing
Hmm.
everything. And so shortly after that, I ended up getting a DUI, which was really a wake up call for me because
Was
I
that
didn't,
like your turning point or?
yeah, 100%, because I realized like, oh my God, like I could lose my son, or like, I don't know, it
Hmm.
just kind of became real for me. And like,
Hmm.
growing up in Wisconsin, like my parents drank every night.
Hmm.
Like it was normal. That's just, you got home from work, you drank until you went to bed. Like that's just how it was.
Yeah. A Wisconsin piece of culture almost that we
Yeah.
normalize and it really isn't normal.
Yeah. And so like when I was doing that, I didn't think it was a problem, and
Hmm.
it's not until like I see my Facebook memories pop up from like 10, 12 years ago, and I'm literally doing my homework because I was in college at the time too. And I have a bottle of vodka in the photo and a shot glass. And I'm like studying, and I have like and I'm like,
Oh,
oh my God. Like
yeah.
I was literally getting wasted doing my homework, getting up, going to work, after work, going to school. I mean, it was
Hmm.
such a blur. But yeah, the DUI was a huge wake up call. Unfortunately, it being my lowest point ended up costing me like $10,000
Hmm.
in fines, and I ended up not being able to care for my son and I anymore, just because financially I just didn't have the means. And at that same time, my son's father had went to jail, so he was no longer providing any financial support either. Um, and so luckily, I had credit cards. I had really good credit, and so I
Hmm.
started paying like our rent on my credit cards,
Hmm.
his daycare on my credit cards. He was like 5 at the time, and just doing anything I could to keep a roof over our head, like whatever it
Hmm.
takes, right? Like mom mode.
Yeah.
And essentially still knowing like, oh my God, I can't do this forever. Like this isn't sustainable,
Hmm.
Um, eventually a boy, he was kind of a boy, a guy I was dating that again I knew wasn't going to work out. Like I knew like, oh,
Hmm.
he's not the one, invited us to move in, my son and I.
Okay.
I've been dating on and off for like 3 years. And so the agreement was he'd pay the rent and like I pay the
Hmm.
utilities. And I was like, okay, let's do it, because I couldn't keep living where I was.
Yeah, you're kind of out of options, and this was kind of like that olive branch feeling, like, okay, at least I can get by a little bit better.
Yeah, 100%. So I sold everything. I had a 2-bedroom apartment at the time. I sold my bed, sold everything, moved in with him, and he also had a son. And that was tumultuous because we were fighting, and my son and I ended up moving out like 5 months later
Mm.
from there. And because I racked up all my credit cards, exceeded their limits. I probably had
Mhm.
like $20,000 of credit card that I wasn't paying,
Mm.
because I
Hmm.
couldn't.
Yeah.
And so when we moved out from him, I couldn't get an apartment. I wouldn't get approved anywhere because my
Hmm.
credit was in the trash. And so my son and I were essentially homeless, which at the time was very interesting because my mindset has always been very um, positive and
Hmm.
oriented, and like just knowing like I have such a deep trust in the universe that like we're going to be okay no matter what. And so like the time is ticking before we have to move out, and I'm applying and applying and applying and just getting rejected and rejected and rejected. And, you know, I'm like talking to my coworkers about it at the time. And one of the girls I worked with, whom had just started working there probably like 3 months before, so I didn't know her that well.
Hmm.
And I said, oh, this is the situation. And she's like, oh, you and your son can move in with me. And I'm like, what? Like,
Yeah.
okay. But like, again, like my deep trust and like knowing the universe supports me and the
Hmm.
universe has my back. And
Hmm.
I just look at her as like such an angel.
Yeah.
She had a 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom apartment, only has known me for 3 months, moves my son and I in with her. And I think we were there for like 2 months before I was able to get approved and like get my own place again. And like we're not even in contact today anymore. Like our friendship has completely dissolved, and not on bad terms, but just
Yeah.
like I believe that like the purpose that people come into your life for, and it's like a reason, a season, or a lifetime. And it's
Hmm.
you can just see so clearly that she was put there for, I don't even want to say for me because that seems like so selfish.
Yeah. No, sometimes people are meant to come into our lives to help us in such different ways. And, it's okay because if we remained friends with everyone that did that for us, it'd be impossible to keep those relationships true and authentic because you would run out of time to talk to everyone. And I think it's so great that we do meet those people that come into our lives at the exact moment we need them. And then it's almost like the relationship dissolves when you also need it to resolve at that time too.
Yeah. Yeah, it was. And it's not even until like in hindsight looking back where I'm like, oh my God, like
Hmm.
you were homeless. Like I never thought that in the moment. It blows my mind still. But yeah,
Do you
so
think if you would have had that thought, it would have changed things in your outcome? Because I think a lot of times if like you probably were able to wave on the side of the positivity and know that you always could come back from it. But do you think if you would have ever switched that mindset, like that hopelessness mindset, do you think that would have changed the course of you making it out of that situation?
I'm sure, I'm sure 100%. And like the other thing I think of is like I could have moved home.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Like I could have
Yeah.
moved home. My parents would have gladly taken my son and I in, and like that thought wasn't even an option in my mind. I was like, I don't
Mm-hmm.
want to move home. Like I'm going to be okay. And
Yeah.
yeah, I remember at the time, like when I was paying all my credit cards, I mean, all my rent and utilities and everything on my credit cards and barely scraping by. Like I remember my dad bought my mom a bike for her birthday,
Mm-hmm.
and I was talking to him about it, and he was like, oh, yeah, I was like, oh, how much was the bike? And he's like, $2,500. And I was like, Dad, you spent $2,500 on a bike. I can't even pay my rent. Like, what?
Yeah.
I was like so mad, just the perspective shift of like,
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh my gosh. But yeah, so, you know, after that, moving on, getting my own place, I graduated college. Finally, it took a while with all that going
Yeah.
on. Um, I became a yoga teacher, a meditation teacher, just really connecting like to my truest self,
Mm.
and saying yes to the things that are truly for me, versus
Mm-hmm.
like marrying my son's father when I knew I shouldn't, or moving in with my ex-boyfriend when I knew I shouldn't, and now I'm just like really tapping into what's best for me and like getting
Hmm.
more comfortable with that voice and that knowing and that like, trusting it. I was able to leave my corporate job that I worked at for 18 years since I've moved out here. That was super comfortable. And start my own business now, which is amazing. And when I left my corporate job, like I had over $100,000 saved in the bank. And that was within like 6 years of, you know, having all that debt. And
Hmm.
it's just like the turnaround that's possible when your mindset is like aligned and knows and trusts and believes, and it's just
Hmm.
like I'm just like, okay, universe, like what's next? Like show me, like.
I think it's incredible, but also very empowering for others to know like you went through some like the hardest, most difficult things that one could face. And at such a young age, when I feel like our 20s are painted as like this time of fun and freedom, and we don't know what we're doing and it's okay, but like they're actually so hard. And I feel like when you hit like 27, 28, right before your 30s, like life just finds a way to smack you in the face. And you get like the biggest wake up call, and they can come in so many different areas, but it's amazing. And I think it's a great, like, I don't want to say like a test, but just to see how we can come out of it and come through it with perseverance and just the big mindset shifts and knowing like it's going to be okay, and learning those life lessons instead of recycling through them and repeating patterns.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's super cool now even to talk to my son about it, and he's 14 and really curious, about a lot of things in or his
Hmm.
earlier life because his dad's not in his life. He's in jail still.
Yeah.
And, so he asked a lot of questions. I'm always like sharing memories and stories and all
Hmm.
things. And when I have this realization of like, oh my gosh, we moved in you know, with my coworker and, and he's like, mommy, like those times were the best times of my life.
Oh,
He's like, I had no idea that we were homeless or that you were going through all that struggle. And I was like, good. Like, I never wanted you to like that, you to
feel
feel
that.
that. Yeah. And so it's just like so beautiful, that it doesn't resonate, or I guess my perspective resonates, right? And he doesn't
Hmm.
feel the struggle.
I think
'Cause
that is so crazy. Like when you're a mom, like you feel like you're doing the best that you can. And sometimes it doesn't always feel like it's enough. But to our kids, just showing up and being there is enough for them, and like giving them that love and that time. And what a testament to your perseverance and your resiliency.
Yeah, 100%. And he's like, my son is my best friend, like
Yeah.
even going through all those times when like I couldn't afford a babysitter, like I brought him to school with me, to college. Like he would
Yeah.
come to college with me. He would go to my AA classes with me. Like he was like my little ride or die, like we
Yeah.
did everything together. And our bond is like so strong and so beautiful. And yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing just what you do as a mama, just to like make it happen.
Yeah. So where are you now? I know a little bit before we started this, like you talked about you're getting to travel. What does this side of the hill look like?
This side of the hill is still blowing my mind with how beautiful it is. Like the universe is still blowing my mind with what's possible. Like when I tell you I met the man of my dreams and now we are engaged and getting
Oh,
married next year.
I
And
just got goosebumps.
it like I can't even believe a man like him exists. And it's like when you just kind of, and what happened for that to exist is like I let go of all my expectations.
Mm,
Now how you have in your mind like, oh well, my man's gonna look like this and he's gonna be like this and he's gonna, we have our lists.
yeah.
And I finally, once I got back out on my own again, I just like surrendered and I was like, okay. I stopped looking, and I was like,
Mm.
I'm good.
Drop
And
the
he just
forcing
like,
it.
yeah, I stopped forcing it, and he appeared, and I was like, even when he appeared, I was like, nah, because he's 6 years younger than me, and so like I was in my 30s and he was in his 20s, and I'm like, I have a kid, this
Hmm.
ain't gonna work out. But like I had released all expectations, and so I'm
Hmm.
like, you know what? I'll go out with him and we'll just have fun. We're gonna
Yeah.
have fun, and I have no expectations because I know this isn't gonna work out. So I'm just gonna go have a fun day with him. And look at us now, 7 years later,
Oh my
7 years later.
gosh.
So it's just like It's mind blowing and so beautiful. And I just keep um, saying to the universe, how can it get better than this?
Mm-hmm.
That's my motto, because we're so conditioned to have the negativity bias, and think worst case scenario. And so when things are going good, I'm asking, how can it get better than this? And when things are going
Mm-hmm.
bad, I'm still asking, how can it get better than this? And it's just like a universe, show me what's next, show me which way to go, show me anything. I'm listening, I'm here, I'm receptive.
It's almost like a reward too for healing those parts of you and releasing what wasn't serving you. Like, imagine how many people have felt the exact same way as you did, but they chose to just stay with that person out of obligation or because they thought that it was like the only option they had. And for you to be able to overcome that belief and then find this man now and understand what a true valued partner is and what a great relationship looks like and feels like. If you didn't release that, you wouldn't be able to have probably experienced it in the way you are now.
Yeah, 100%. So yeah, now I'm working on creating my dream business, which is holistic wellness. It's like an integrated approach, mind, body, spirit, interconnectedness, and coherence. Just helping people remember the truth of who they are and like their wholeness and their
Mm.
completeness and the interconnectedness of all things, our environment, and living in sync with that aspect of it. Yeah.
I bet you're able to tie a lot of your experiences that you lived into your business also. And just going through some like very difficult things and to come out on the other side, you in a way were living your own business and what its growth was going to be, and that you can provide that help and support for others now too.
Oh yeah, 100%. And it's still evolving, right? Like it's not a one done, okay, check the box, I'm healed, I'm evolved, like it's still a
Hmm.
daily thing. It's a lifetime thing, which is humbling, because after overcoming so much, you think like, oh wow, like I'm good now, right? But
Hmm.
even with my son and I's relationship or my partner and I's relationship, you'll be on a really good, like even keel. And then it's like, and you're like,
Hmm.
the universe is like, oh, you thought you were good. Like,
One of the biggest things that we realize is that, like you've said it so well, like there, once we drop the checklists and the check marks and the expectations and just allow what we want to become attracted to us and we fill that in and we stop forcing it, it just allows for so much more to come to existence.
100%. I think, the intelligence of the universe is so much greater than our own.
Hmm.
And I feel like as humans, like we take on, like, it's our ego really of like,
Hmm.
I'm controlling this. I'm going to do this. I want to do this in my business. But it's like when you open it up into an expansive frame of mind versus like a
Hmm.
constricted, like, it's all up to me to make my rent payment. It's all up to me to, you know, sure, you can have that mindset, but like you're going to be so limited in what you get when you
Hmm.
open up and you're like, okay, universe, like, how are we going to get this rent payment this month? Like, where is it coming from? I know it's on its way to me. How? From who? You know what I mean? It's
Yep,
much greater.
exactly. I have a post-it note that I keep on my desk, and it says, if we knew the how, life would be boring.
Yes.
Because if we were able to plan everything and know exactly where things were going to come from, what was going to happen, like life would be boring. We wouldn't learn or grow or become the people that we're evolving into. So I think it's so important that if you can drop the how and just focus on what you want, it allows the universe to really fill in what you do desire. So I am curious, within your type, you're a generator. So like saying yes to things that light you up is so important for your energy, and saying no to things you don't want to do, also extremely important. So within your whole experience, how did you learn what to say yes to and what to say no to? And was that tied to any other limiting beliefs, like in people pleasing or the shoulds, or I need to do it because this was always done this way?
Yeah. I've never considered myself a people pleaser. However, I've had a very hard time saying no, like my whole entire life. And I think it's for fear of upsetting people or like creating conflict and like
Hmm.
having to have conflict, which I guess would make me a people pleaser. I don't know. Like I don't know, maybe, but yeah, it's definitely becoming clearer as I get older and I'm working on it like so intentionally this year. And I think throughout my life, because like even my partner will say, like, if I'm like, okay, like to my son, like time to get ready for bed. And then he's like, oh, 10 more minutes. And I'm like, okay. And then he's like, 10 more minutes. I'm like, okay. He's like, you really need to keep your word because like, you just allow people to push and push and push and take and take and take. And I'm like, yeah, I guess I do, because I don't know, it's definitely something I'm still working through and working on. But I have noticed, like, as far as like in relationships, when my partner is like, do you want to do this? I'm like, he works out every day. So every day he's like, want to come work out with me? I'm like, no, it's like, it's a no for me. And he's
Yeah.
like, it's always going to feel like a no, but like, you gotta be disciplined. And I was like, listen, I'm on my menstrual. It's a full moon. It's a no for me.
I am resting.
Yes, I'm resting. And he's like, he just like rolls his eyes. So I'm definitely working on it and getting clearer with it. The yeses are very easy. The nos are a bit more challenging.
Yeah, I remember I was thrown into like a variety of different life experiences where I said yes and I should have said no. And then you're in that situation, you're like, oh, if I had just answered how I felt like I should have answered, then I wouldn't be in this situation. And one of the things that really helped me was remembering and reminding myself, and I still say this, is like, we are not responsible for how anyone else reacts or what their emotions are based on our response. Like, if we say no and they choose to get upset, that's on them. But we stood what was true to us and we stood our ground. And that always helps me because I remember, like, they might need to release some stuff, they might need to heal some stuff, they might need to work on how they respond. And that's not my responsibility to do that for them. And that always is really helpful for me in knowing, like, okay, if I say no to this person and they are sad or they want to like make me feel guilty, like that's not my responsibility that they feel that way. I'm honoring myself and what I want to do because I know it's going to be better for me.
100%. Yeah, I think as women, like in general, too, just like with being silenced for so many years and like our needs and desires being pushed down, like we have generational trauma
Mhm.
in that we're still moving through and working towards and trying to eliminate, right? Especially you said you have a daughter, right? Like
Mhm.
doing that for her, but yeah, it's a daily process. But I like that. I like that frame of mind. I'll definitely use that one.
Yeah, it's so exciting too. And I always, another thing I love to do is I'll sometimes keep like a notepad and I'll do what was the question that was given or the event I was invited to. Did I want to say yes or no? And then what was the outcome? So, like, just the other weekend, I got asked like to go like out dancing and I like did not want to go. And I was like, well, I feel like they're gonna feel like mad at me if I don't go. And so I went anyways, and I was so tired. And I like just the next morning I was tired. And I was like, if I just said no, I could have like cleaned, gotten some stuff done, and I would have felt so much more energized. So it's still work in progress, but I always like to document too, like my success rate with that. And it just helps strengthen that neural connection then too.
Yeah, absolutely. I can definitely see how that would. Oh, that's a great idea.
Yeah. So I'm curious, so you said you're a little bit into human design. Have you looked at your son's chart at all or your partner's chart?
Yes, yes, I have. I don't know, like, I'm not super deep in the knowledge of it, but
Mhm.
yeah, so I'm a generator. My partner is a projector,
Okay, so you
and my
invite him into things. Here he is inviting you everywhere, and you need to be like, hey, I need to invite you to the gym.
I know, and my son is a manifester. So we have
Okay,
all three of us.
I love that. Yeah, my daughter's a manifestor too, and I'm like, oh goodness, like, because they want to initiate things, right? And it's like in their energy to kind of drive that trail and blaze those trails. And I'm like, okay, as a mom, like, how can I honor that, but also like remind them that they like need to have boundaries and like still listen to us. And so
Mm.
I'm excited to go through those situations. 'Cause she's only a year and a half and she already is so sassy. So I'm like, oh gosh.
It's definitely a delicate dance,
Hmm.
parenthood in general, and then weaving in like the astrology and the human design and all the aspects of our personalities and how the planets affect us. Like it's just kind of like this ebb and flow, and it's a constant give and take, I feel.
Yes, the ebb and flow and finding that flow is when things really go. And when you start forcing it, and I feel like that's when the frustration and like the energy switches. I'm like, okay, gotta pivot back to that flow and stop forcing things.
Hmm.
So I definitely feel that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Jamie, is there any other last comments or anything you want to share for our listeners? Kind of like a wrap up on your story, or if they want more from you, if they want to reach out to you, share their own stories or work with you, like where can they do that?
Yeah, absolutely. I have my website is myholisticwell.com. And there's some resources on there that you can grab. I also have a YouTube channel with a bunch of meditations. It's like a nice little library of meditations, affirmations, little tips and tricks to help ground you, center you, all things holistic living. And
I
that
love that.
YouTube is I am Jamie Sue is my YouTube.
Perfect. And I can link those in the show notes as well, just to make sure if they want to reach out to you, they have that opportunity too. But thank you again, Jamie, for coming on. It was so impactful to hear your story, and thank you for sharing such an empowering like life story. It was amazing.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Taryn. It's been an honor being here with you.
All right, thanks, Jamie.
Bye.
Thank you so much for tuning into episode 3 of the podcast. Wasn't Jamie's story incredible? I welcome you as a listener to follow and subscribe to my podcast and share with a friend. And if you're wanting even more information on the podcast, courses I offer, or free content on creating your own beautiful life with the help of human design, be sure to follow my Instagram at It's Taryn Johnson or check out my website, tarynjohnson.com. Thanks, and I'll see you on the next episode.